Please welcome Joe Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you all for being here. You're the reason why I'm so glad to be here. I'm now going to apologize at the beginning because people who know me know the story of the fact that when I said to my dad, when he was talking about money and monetary reform, and I said, I really hate economics, you know, and I said, I really don't care to try to study economics, Dad, you know. He said, well, it's a good thing that you haven't studied economics, because if you had, you'd have a lot of stuff to unlearn before you could start learning about money. And I was using that to drive home the fact. There's been some discussion lately about that. The money system, the monetary system of the country, and how it works is not taught in any university in this country. It is not taught in any college in this country. It is not taught anywhere, as far as that I know, in the world. That no country that I know has academic credits for the monetary system. So the fact that we're here, and I had the advantage of my dad learning about the monetary system, is tribute to him, okay? Tribute to him that he undertook to do the research on it so that we could learn about it. Now, having said that, I'm going to draw you into economics. And again, with my apologies, but I'm going to ask that people that are here, that are learning, that know about things about money, to try to just expand their consciousness a little bit, because I feel that this paper of Dr. Hyman Minsky is what makes the whole study of economics meaningful and puts it in a concise and purposeful piece of research. And Dr. Minsky is a very well-known, very highly respected, most highly respected research economist. He was considered somewhat of a heterodox economist just because he studied the economy from the perspective of not only of the post-Keynesian perspective, but that of somewhat heterodox views of what was going on with the economy. And throughout his career, he's known for his financial instability hypothesis, which is the financial instability hypothesis, if I can try to say it in a word, it's that people act irrationally, and we have financial instability on a regular basis as a natural outcome of capitalism of all things, So he was identifying some of the problems with capitalism within the terms of his financial instability hypothesis. My dad knew Hyman Minsky. My dad communicated with Hyman Minsky, corresponded with him, and I believe he met with him a couple of times in Washington, D.C. And my dad said to me at one point that he thought that Hyman Minsky was going to be the economist that finally got money, okay? And whether he did or not, he did publish just shortly before he died, just a couple of years, 2 years before he died, after publishing since the early 50s into the early 90s, incredible research papers on what we would call political economy, what Stevens Arlenga expresses right here as the basic element function of the political economy. Whoever controls the money system controls the nation, and that's what political economy to me is all about. And Stevens said it so well. So that's trying to create the big picture here. We have Dr. Hyman Minsky, a guy who people should know, and I kind of consider this, to be honest with you, this is my attempt to take back Hyman Minsky, okay? Because Hyman Minsky is the guy who the modern monetary theorists say provides the shoulders upon which they build their quasi-monetary economic story, and get you to believe that the government creates money right now today, by keystroking. But Minsky was, much less than making that statement, and in fact, he never made that statement. The one statement that they say that Hyman Minsky, the monetary theory people say, Hyman Minsky is famous for saying, is that is that anybody can create money, but the problem is getting it accepted. Now, I don't know, people in this room might know it better than me, but my research has shown the only place I can find that in references in modern monetary theory work, okay? But anyway, let's get on to Dr. Hyman Minsky, because Hyman Minsky wrote this paper in 1994, and this is the title of it. This is actually, below the line, this is actually from the title page of the thing. And I have to apologize for those who might have gotten confused like Howard did. When I sent it around to everybody, it said, Joe's working paper number 127. And when I spoke to Howard last night, he said, I read through 3/4 of that thing before I realized it wasn't you. You know? And maybe you'll see why. Because I feel that it's there. But see how he wrote this? Financial instability. That's his theme. That's his working theme. Okay? That the capitalist system functions within a financial instability, in the financial instability hypothesis. There will be booms and there will be busts, and that is what financial instability is all about. And he talks in here about what causes it, what are the institutional causes of it, and even what are the political causes of it. And if this goes first, okay? So, why starting out right here? This is how he starts it out, the definition of the problem. Okay, I'm going to stop. Because, see that on the bottom? Anything that's written up here in that cursive, format, font, okay, which is the Comic Sans font. And I figured let's have a little brevity at least in the font, okay? But this is the rest of this stuff. If it's not in that font, it's Hyman Minsky. If it's in that font, it's Joe Bongiovanni, okay? So he says the definition of the problem, financial instability, okay? And he said, and the decline of banking, you know? And then he put a question mark about whether or not this is going to be the outcome here. And he says the public policy implications. That's the title. He says banking plays two roles in a modern capitalist economy. It supplies the means of payments, and it channels resources into the capital development of the economy. He's starting to set out, and he lays out the basis of the problem. That's the problem. That is the problem. People that don't understand how money works and the economy works, that's the problem. Banking has two roles. They provide the means of payments, they create money, and they channel resources into the capital development of the economy. This world that we're living in is the outcome of the bankers' capital development of our economy. If you think they're doing a good job, let's leave it like it is. And if it ain't, let's see if we can figure out something to do about it. That's my point, okay? And so in his writings, and this just goes further, I'm going to go quickly through some of this. I gave you the minute to reflect on that. Though these developments suggest that the role in the economy of government organizations to supervise, regulate, and banks to control the growth of bank money and ensure that those bank liabilities that function as a part of the payment mechanism are always available. That is to say that the bank credit, okay, the guys that are creating money, that there will always be money to pay the debts, okay, needs to be reviewed. It needs to be reviewed. He's saying that in 1994, and we had gone through several crises, not so much before that, okay? It needs to be reviewed. Sorry, but the role of government needs to be reviewed. Yes, that is our message. The role of government needs to be reviewed. And then he says, just to define that, in general, the discourse on economic policy takes place on two planes. I'll leave the first one out, okay? It's not important. But the second is that of the legislation and administrative decisions that affect the structure and operations of banking and financial markets, and the government involvement in setting rules that constrain and contain banking and financial markets. This paper concentrates on policy of the second legislating institutions and usages plane. So he's just saying that this is all, he wrote this paper on the basis of providing information about how he thinks banking and financial markets ought to change in a capitalist economy in order to do what? That comes at the end, okay? Did I just go past the slide? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is something for people who want to think about economics and who, as they look at economics and study economics, to think of this. I put it out here in terms of modern monetary theory, never, ever doing this, okay? Every economic policy argument reflects a maintained economic theory. It behooves anyone who analyzes, and advocates economic policy to make where he is coming from clear. They don't do that, do they? I mean, do they even take a stab at doing that? This comment is written from the perspective of the financial instability hypothesis, and we're going to talk about that, and its interpretation of the general theory of Keynes. Now, the only reason I have that up there is because I want to explain how monumental this is. Now, this is the general theory of Keynes, which has ruled Western civilization for, most of the last 100 years, and it's Minsky's, who was the most ardent analyst of that system, looking at it through his financial instability hypothesis. Okay? So this theory of financial instability holds that the periods of incoherent behavior occur as a natural outcome of the interactions between the flows of income, on the one hand, and payment flows due to financial commitments and the prices of assets as determined in the markets. Now, let me interpret that, okay? Between having the income on one side, okay, and having the debts on the other side, okay? And to say, if it's not coherent, what's it going to result in? Financial instability. So he says these interactions reflect the essential characteristics of a capitalist economy. And to me, this is very important. It's the modern financial capitalist economy. And that it's simultaneously an income-generating system and a financial system. And remember the problem in the beginning. The problem. We stated the problem. So we said, in the theory Keynes developed, upon which financial instability hypothesis is built, money and finance are in general not neutral. This is very important because a lot of times when we're trying to have a discussion about monetary reform, and people try to tell you that money is neutral. Well, money is an endogenous money system. People borrow money and it comes into existence. But as Stephen never let us forget, whoever controls the money system controls the nation. And by the way, this is my interpretation of why Hyman Minsky agrees with him. In particular, changes in monetary and financial institutions will affect the path of the economy through time. And I got to admit, I'm a little bit guilty. I'm more than a little bit. I'm guilty here. What am I doing? I'm taking a research paper and I'm just putting it up on the board and saying, this is what this guy said. But to me, this is important stuff. Changes in monetary institutions will affect the path of the economy over time. That's what Stephen says. In the financial instability hypothesis, business cycles mainly result from interactions between payment commitments, debts, which arise in the process of financing investments and positions in capital assets. He's an economist. He wants to keep working as an economist. He talks in economist language, which is about capital investment, okay? But what you and I can think of it as having any money to pay our mortgage or to pay our rent or for any other purpose, really, okay? And the flows of gross capital incomes, which are determined by the structure of aggregate demand. So in other words, he's saying, the reason we have financial instability is because it's nobody's job in a free market capitalist economy to make sure that there's enough incomes coming in on the income side to pay the debts that are out there on the outcome side, and those debts that are out there on the outcome side are necessary because that's how we get our money. Okay, now to me, this is a poignant, if not, total truism about what's going on in the world today. He says, business cycles are endogenous to capitalist economies. In our complex world, households, government units, and foreign governments and enterprises have outstanding debts. So we all have debts. That's me again. And gross capital incomes can be either more than sufficient, or insufficient to fulfill the payment commitments made during the prior finance. Okay? Meaning, we might not all have the incomes to pay those debts. And here I wrote, remember Reverend Coates and the musical chairs, because that's the economy that we live in. We live in the musical chair economy where there's not enough money to pay all the debts, and it leads us to financial instability, at least. Then when you think about the social, environmental, economic consequences of not having the money to pay the debts, that's where we are. We're facing those today, especially at the state level. He brings in the discussions about the reforms of the 30s, because until this time, Hyman Minsky had never engaged with anything that went on about what we would call monetary reform, with the great monetary reformers of Simons and Fisher, and even Friedman, in that way. He says, much of economic history in the United States could be written in terms of attempts to get money right. Very few people would agree with that, but it's true. It's true, it's very true. He says, after a particular monetary and banking financial structure had failed, either economically or politically, a new structure was put in place. Let me finish this. This history of reform and subsequent failure, followed by another round of reform, reflects the two not completely compatible requirements placed upon the monetary and banking system to provide a safe and sound medium of exchange, having money, and to furnish channels for the financing of the capital development of the economy. And he's saying there's a conflict there. There's a contention there, and it's systemic. It's institutional. It's foundational as far as I'm concerned. He says, and this is what my dad called, just to bring my dad back into it, he called this the regulatory business cycle. That's what my dad said. Well, yeah, and Minsky's basically saying the same thing. Because we deregulate, and we get booms, and we regulate, because we get bust, and then we regulate. It just goes on. So it's really hard to keep a cadre of public purpose regulators in place because we regulate and deregulate. Then they move on. They move on to the banking system. So the whole system is set up to basically keep us off guard, undercapitalized, if you will, as consumers and citizens, and to take that. So this once there may very well be a mismatch between the structure of the Federal Reserve System and the manner in which it interacts with the economy. Think so? Think so? It may very well be. It may very well be. He wouldn't be surprised, and neither would I. Goes on to say, and to me, this is so, all of this is just so important. This is all so important to understand. An additional and equally important reason for the absence of a deep depression is that in big government capitalism, which is what he called, where we were at that period in the 90s, a fall in investment does not mean that capital incomes collapse, which is what normally happens in a deep recession or depression. And he's saying that, the combination of the safety nets that are available, where when the private sector is not able to keep the economy going, that we have the safety net system that somewhat, keeps incomes going. He says, this is so because government deficits are the equivalent of investment to sustaining the aggregate capital incomes. And again, he uses the term aggregate capital incomes. Just think incomes, because incomes is what's important to be on our side of the equation, equals, capital, the development of the economy. Okay? So to me, this is so fundamental. I really should spend a half a minute, to say how important it is. And on the bottom, that's me again. Hello post-Keynesians, hello progressives, hello non-aligned economists. Please inform Grover, and please inform the Republican economists, go bigger government. What he's saying here is that even though they were financing the deficit through debt, okay, they're borrowing some money that already existed out there. If the government didn't do that, it would not be part of the economy, and the size of the national economy would be less, and therefore there would be less of everything for everybody. There would be less jobs, there would be less incomes, there would be less everything. So the fact that the government, in a modern capitalist, big government capitalism, steps in and provides a larger deficit to compensate for the lack of private investment, that is the equivalent of investment in sustaining aggregate capital incomes. So why shouldn't we have bigger deficits? There's no reason to not have bigger deficits. Our issue has never been with not having bigger deficits, it's how do you finance the deficits? Because Minsky didn't quite go that far. So then he talks about now we're going to start to move into the stabilization part of it. So what are we going to do about that? In our recent experience, the main stabilizing device, and they just started repeating that, prevented the financial fiascos of the late 80s and 90s from turning into a depression, because we had financial fiascos in the late 80s and 90s, in case people forgot, okay, was the government's deficit, okay? So that's Minsky saying that, And again, to me, it's a truism that it can't be denied. Stabilization policy that relies mainly upon government deficits to sustain profits and stimulate private investment. And again, this is in the like saving capitalism kind of economic theme, okay? So we say we want to do that. Government surpluses to constrain profits, it's not how the government surpluses to constrain profits, prices, and exuberant investment requires the discipline of a fiscal policy that does not allow the quality of government debt to be compromised. In other words, the government must issue the debt in order to achieve the balance that is required to get anywhere near the potential of the economy being the same as the economy, which is what he says here. A policy posture that aims at portfolio conservatism by creating crunches and threats of debt deflations, that's the financial instability hypothesis, right? Will lower economic growth by lowering the overall ratio of the attained GDP to the potential GDP. And to me, it's really, kind of elementary that you understand that the basic well-being of the economy is in achieving our potential GDP. If we're going to measure it by GDP, and I know there are people who say we shouldn't measure it by GDP, but that's the measure that we have. So if we're going to measure it by GDP, then we have to have an economy that has the revenues, the incomes on that side to achieve the potential GDP. Please read twice. Okay, so then he goes into, now he's discussing policy. 100% money or the National Banking Act redux. Now that's his own thing there. It's like, to me, you need to understand the National Banking Act to actually understand it. But he says, we can now because you read Fisher. Okay, before this, I'm not giving you the whole paper, although for the people who are part of our group, they have the whole paper, okay? But this is what he said. We can now have a banking system, not a money system, in which the banks hold interest-bearing reserves at the Federal Reserve equal to 100% of their deposits subject to check. And that's what we always talk about, 100%, what 100% reserves are. And the Federal Reserve banks hold the bonds to offset their currency and bank reserve liabilities. Okay, so the member banks have the liabilities, and they need to be offset, which is your checking account, and that has to be offset by, in this case, the bonds. This would give us a monetary system in which the currency and deposits are fully equivalent to the assets by which are offset in the books of commercial reserve banks. The conditions for 100% money are satisfied. What's he really saying there? What he's really saying there is that we can do away with financial instability. That's what he's saying, those conditions of 100% money are satisfied. We can do that right now. And since he had spent the last 20 years anyway, since he wrote his financial instability hypothesis in a book form, it was honest to me, it was an amazing conversion, if you will, over to realizing what my dad thought he might realize, which was that it's the debt-based money system, fractional reserve banking, who had the slide up before, too much money on the upside, too little money on the downside, exacerbating each other always, so the higher booms and the deeper bust, and to come around and say, we can straighten that out just by taking Fisher's 100% money route. Now, this is the part I like. The one virtue of that money scheme is that it separates those two functions of the monetary and banking system has to perform. Again, the provision of a safe and secure means of payment, money, and the capital development of the economy. Okay? Now, that is such a great, great notion that look who wrote about it. The problem with money and banking, inseparability. Joe Bongiovanni, director. Yes, I wrote this article, I don't remember when it was. 2016, I was over before that. But anyway, my point is that this is something that monetary reformers have known for a long time, okay? And this is what Glass-Steagall did away with. Glass-Steagall said, no, you can't have the front end of the bank, which is the money issuing part of the bank, and the back end of the bank, which has managing the liabilities by doing its investments. You can't have those under attached, so that when one fails, it drags the other one down. Okay, that's what Glass-Steagall prevented. What Bill Clinton, undid with his Graham Bleach Lally, whatever it was. Bill. So, for progress to a small number of banks, each one which is too big to fail, with maximum credit lines so large that the conditions of supply of credit to large borrowers will improve relative to conditions of supply of credit to small borrowers, that's a hard thing to read. I had to read it 3 times, to be honest with you, before I got, oh, okay. Seems to be a most likely outcome of what is now taking place. Again, is that a prescient observation? You know, is too big to fail the rule of the day? He says this is where we're going to head to if we don't fix something. That's what Hyman Minsky was saying. Sorry, please read that one again. Also take Beverly coats and the musical chairs again, okay? Because having no access to credit, okay, where you and I live is where we're at. This is where we're at. And we need to be able to do something to change that. So here's his modest proposal, okay? And this is how he wrote it at the end of that paper. And again, this is his, you know, a working paper for the Levy Institute. The time has come to open a national inquiry into the structure of the banking and financial system. Anybody can remember this? I use this slide, and not this particular slide, but I use the language that's in this slide in previous talks that I've given, because to me, it's so essential. The radical changes now underway in technology, computing, and communication means that much of what we now have may be obsolete. The money system and banking system is obsolete. Now he says maybe obsolete because he wants to keep his position, as a guy who writes papers that people pay attention to. The sluggish economy of the past, combined with the apparent reluctance of the Federal Reserve to give full employment a chance, as Nick was saying before, okay, they've got the mandate, but they're not doing it, and they're not doing it by a long shot, and how come we're letting them get away with it? But Minsky says that can mean that our financing structures are not consistent with the needs of a progressive democracy. And if what we want is not to meet the financial needs of a progressive democracy, I don't know what else we want. I don't know why else we get up in the morning and become monetary reformers all day. So in 1994, Hyman Minsky observed that finance, capitalism itself, might not be consistent with the needs of a progressive democracy. Who frickin' Ray? Okay, because that's Hyman Minsky. Of course, that's me. that part's me. But his observations are there, and they were there for everybody to see. And my question is, how come modern monetary theory people aren't dealing with this as a basis for, you know, for their what? I don't know. So, and then part 2 of it. In the past, serious changes were the result of a serious public inquiry. Suggests that enough is amiss. I suggest that enough is amiss in our financial and banking structures. Enough is amiss. That it's time to go back to the drawing board and determine what the monetary, financial, and financing arrangement should be in the 21st century. We ain't in the 21st century. You know, nobody picked up on Hyman Minsky's working paper number 127, which to me is, you know, a significant document, such a significant document. And he says, a late 20th century National Monetary Commission should be on the public policy agenda. And so if anybody wants to know where I think we should be going from here, that's where, okay? Because I agree completely with Minsky. And you can take an economist approach to it. That's pretty much all in for reform. That's pretty much Hyman Minsky being all in for reform. And so to me, the fact that we've got, you know, people who say that they're you know, being carried on the shoulders of giants like Hyman Minsky, well, there's the shoulders of Hyman Minsky right there. So why don't you guys get on it, and we can maybe accomplish something together instead of being out there talking foolishness about the government creates money today by keystroking. That's it. Thank you. Sorry, I have another role. I have another role that I have to figure out how to do. I guess I have to go like that. Might need help here. Let's see. All I'm really trying to do is just get out of it. And the next item that's up on the agenda is myself and Mark going to have a chat. We're going to talk about how to bring the conservatives and the progressives together.
Do you have any slides, Mark?